Hello, I'm Rosina Plain and welcome to part one of my Letitia's Garden Cal. As you might know by, or might be able to guess from the title, it's in the same format as my last year's Cal, Letitia's Holiday. So I'm using exactly the same size blankets as we did before, so all of the patterns that were in Letitia's Holiday can be sort of mixed and matched with the ones for Letitia's Garden, so that can create some interesting effects. Now in front of me you'll see that that doesn't look much like a garden cal. These are actually gauge swatches, the swatches that I made when making the tutorial for to show you how to do the inset and the overlay mosaic techniques. So the reason for showing you this here is so you can see, but each one of these uses exactly the same chart with the same hook size, same yarn, same number of stitches and rows. So what you should be able to see, so this one is the inset mosaic sample. And you'll notice if you compare it to the overlay mosaic one here that you actually, the pattern gets stretched out. So instead of having this repeated 4 times up as we have on the overlay, it's only twice. But actually for the same number of rows, which from the top of my head I think is 24, for the same number of rows you actually, it gets squashed down. And something else that tends to happen as well is if I now just put them this way, you should be able to see that the inset mosaic one is actually a little wider than the overlay. Generally people tend to work overlay mosaic a little looser than the inset mosaic, a little looser than the overlay. So, and as in Letitia's Garden, just like Letitia's Holiday, we're going to be actually alternating between the two different methods. It's really important to adjust your hook size so that you don't get this different width, so they're both the same. So these were both done using a 4mm hook, and I know from experience that to get the inset down to the same width as the overlay for the same number of stitches, I will generally need to use a 3.5mm hook. So throughout this whole cal, I'm going to be using a 3.5mm hook for the inset sections and a 4mm for the overlay. But it's really important to do a gauge swatch so you make sure that you get the correct hook sizes for yourself, because if you don't do that you will end up with wavy edges on your blanket, so all of the overlay bits will sort of go inwards. So really please if you haven't already, have a look at the introduction file and do your gauge swatches. I would say recommend starting with that 0.5mm difference in size. You may find that you can get away with using the same hook size for both, or some people even need a whole millimetre difference in size, but whatever it is, just to make sure that you get the same stitch count for each time. Don't worry about the rows because we sort that out with the border, but say definitely make sure that the width is the same. Okay, so now you've done your gauge swatches, remember this first part is using the overlay mosaic technique, so make sure you're using the hook that was required for your overlay section. So for me that's the 4mm hook which I've got here. You will also need a pair of scissors because we're going to be cutting the yarn at the end of every single row. Don't worry about the ends though, because the lovely envelope border we do at the last part of the cal will cover them up and look fantastic. Okay, so make sure you've got your scissors handy and your larger hook. What I should have also said before, I don't think I mentioned it earlier, because the Letitia's Garden comes in the same sizes as Letitia's Holiday did, so you've got the sort of 3, 4 or 5 repeats wide, but also what I found was lots of people wanted to do a narrow one for either sort of a wall hanging or table runner. So I've also included the instructions for that in this cal. So, and what I'm going to be making is the Country Garden colours, which is these lovely Highland heathers, just the runner for that, for this tutorial. So we need to start, as I said, with our larger hook, and we're going to start with 54 chains, or you can do 53 foundation double crochet if you want. So I'll just show you how I start. Rather than this is totally optional, but rather than doing an actual formal slip knot, what I tend to do to start a chain is, if you can see, just twist that around like so and pull my yarn through. But don't pull that tight. If I pull that tight, that will be effectively a slip knot. But if we leave it nice and loose, we can work into that at the end, and that just creates, I think, a neater edge. Doesn't matter really. Right, so I'm now going to do, as I said, 54 chains. So that's 53 for the that we're going to need for the actual starting stitch count, plus 1, which is effectively a turning chain, just to get us up there. So I'm sure you all know how to do a chain, just like so. So you just carry on, and when you've done 54 chains, I will see you there. Okay, so I've now done my 54 chains, but obviously if you are actually doing the small, medium or large blankets, you're going to need more stitches than that. So just have a little look at the written pattern, and that will tell you what your starting stitch count is going to be. So I've got my 54 chains, and another little tip that I've picked up, which just, for me, when you're starting with chains rather than foundation crochet, double crochet, it's nice to actually, you can get a neater edge by, rather than working in, normally you would work into like this loop of the chain, but if you just twist the chain round. So we missed the first one because that's effectively our turning chain, or it is our turning chain. We're going to just flip that over, and if you can see this extra loop on the back of the chain, it's just going to work into that. So now we just need to work all the way along our chain, working double crochets into that back bump. I'll do a couple more and then I will show you the difference it makes on the bottom. Oh, so just carry on working along. So if you see, I'll show you now. So the top of the work looks like that, as you expect with the 2 loops, but if you, by working into the back chain, if you can see, you've actually got a similar effect on the bottom. So when you're working a border or anything else, it's so much easier and neater, I think anyway, to have the 2 loops on the bottom. But you can do it, yeah, it's going to be inside a border, so if you prefer to work into the chain the normal way, that's absolutely fine, or indeed, as I said, for foundation double crochet. Okay, so just carry on working all the way along to the end of your chain there, and I will see you just before, with the last sort of couple of stitches to go, just to show you how I'm going to finish that off. Okay, so I've now got almost to the end of my foundation row here, so I've just got the last 3 stitches to do. So always worth obviously double checking that you've got the right number of stitches before you go any further. It makes things a lot easier. Okay, so it's 50, so we've got, again, carrying on in the back loops, 51, 52 stitches, and this last one we're just going to work into that sort of knot there. And then now we can pull that slip knot tight, and you can see it gives a much neater edge rather than having this sort of knot sticking out. Not that it makes much difference when you're going to be doing an envelope border, but you know, it's just a little tip that I found. Okay, so I know I said that with overlay crochet, overlay mosaic, all rows are worked with the right side facing you, but we're just for this one row, we're going to turn. So this is effectively our foundation row. So what we've done is it's going to be actually on the wrong side of our blanket. So do a chain. Whenever you get the turning chain, and in the inset sections you will be turning at the end of the row, the turning chains never count as a stitch. Okay, so all we've got to do now is just basically go back and work an ordinary double crochet through both loops all the way to the end. Okay, so if you just carry on and do that, and I will see you when you've done that. So I've now got to the end of row 1 of the pattern, and I have just double checked that I've got the correct number of stitches. Always worth just making that sort of triple check to make sure you've got the correct number of stitches. So I have 53 for my runner size one. You'll probably have more if you do it. You'll obviously have more if you're doing one of the blankets. Okay, so now chopping that off, what we do is make sure you pull that through that loop just to secure the end. So as I said, we're not now going to be turning it. We're going to be working with this side facing us for all the rest of this part 1 section. So we're now going to start with our actual sort of mosaic stitches. So this time we'll start with a proper slip knot on the hook. So that gives you a nice secure starting point. So just make sure you're working through the correct part of the chain of your thing. So we want to start the top of our row 1. So you don't want it twisted. I just start in there with, whoops, get hold of it, a standard double crochet through both loops. So if you're looking at the chart, you will see there are always 2 standard double crochets at the end. That's our edge stitches, just to give us a nice firm edge to start with. But when we're doing overlay mosaic, generally the double crochets aren't worked through both loops. They will generally be just through the back loop. So I call that a BLDC, a back loop double crochet. It'll be a back loop single crochet if you're following the US terms. So what we're going to do on this row is now just working into this back loop. It's going to work all the way to the last 2 stitches, just like so. So it's nice and easy. So just a whole row of back loop double crochets. And what you should see, hopefully you can just see these front loops here, which we haven't used yet, but we're going to be needing them when we come to actually make the pattern. So the thing with mosaic crochet is you will only be using one colour in each row. So although you're getting the pattern, it looks like you've changed the colours, it's all an illusion really. It's really, really nice and easy because you're just using one colour at a time, so none of that fiddly colour changing. Okay, so you just carry on working your row of back loop double crochets, and I will see you when there's 2 stitches remaining on your row. So I've now got to the last 2 stitches on row 2. So as I said before, the first 2 and last 2 stitches will always be worked through both loops. So there we are, we've got to the end of our row, so we're just going to fasten that off. Okay, make sure we pull that through. So that was our colour. It's, if you're following the cottage garden or country garden colourways, that will be your CC2 colour. If you're following the city garden, which has got a reduced palette, there's only actually 3 contrast colours instead of 6 for that one, then that would have been done in XX2. Okay, so now it's time to pick up our CC1 again, which for me is Bracken, and as always starting with slip knot on the hook and standing double crochet. Ooh, try not to pick up the extra little bit there. Standing double crochet and then another standard double crochet through both loops. So we have now done that. So we've got our first stitch is a back loop double crochet, and now the pattern repeat starts. So the pattern repeat starts with another 2 back loop double crochets, so just through that back loop. Oops. And now we're going to do the other overlay mosaic stitch, which is a treble in the front loop. So that's why we've been leaving these front loops spare. So what we're going to do, always or nearly always, you will be working into the same colour. So here we will be. So we're going to completely miss row 2 out and work into these front loops left over from row 1. So just make sure you hold it nice and straight so you can see this would be the stitch you'd normally work into. So directly below that is where we are going to place our treble. So obviously if you're doing the US terms, that would be a double crochet. Okay, so now we have got 3 back loop double crochets to complete that first repeat. There we go. So there we go, nice and simple. That's our first repeat. So we're now just going to carry on across. So we ended there with 3 back loop double crochets. We need to start the next one with 2 more. So you're going to have, all the way along this row, you'll basically have 5 back loop double crochets with 1 front loop treble in between. So if you're a little bit confused about where to place your your treble, you can always count back to make sure you've got the correct number of your front loop showing. So you can see we should have 5 here. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or rather on this row. So on row 1 we are missing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 front loops. So that's absolutely right, because that the 5 front loops there marries up with the 5 back loop double crochets we've done. So always when you've done a front loop treble, should have mentioned it here, make sure you miss the stitch behind. So we're not going to work into, if you can see it, into this stitch here. We're going to make sure we miss that, and now we've got to finish off the second repeat with the 3 back loop double crochets and start the next one with 2 more. So one more time I'll show you that front loop treble 2 down. That'll also be called, if you're following some other designers, they will call that either maybe a drop down treble or a mosaic treble. But because I use inset and overlay mosaic and they work in slightly different ways, I try to actually just give them a description of what it actually is. So it'll be, say for my patterns, it's a front loop treble 2 rows down. Okay, so just carry along like that to the end, making sure that the last 2 stitches, so you should end up with 3 back loop double crochets and then have 2 stitches left, which will be your standard double crochets through both loops. So I will see you when you've done that. Okay, so I'm now almost at the end of row 3 and I'm just gonna finish that off. So you can see I ended with the 3 back loop double crochets there. Just finish that with the 2 standard double crochets for the edge stitches. Cut it off, pull it through. So now we're going to be adding our main colour, which for the purpose of this pattern is basically the background, sort of sky if you wish. But for the cottage garden, country garden pack that I'm doing now, this is the Stylecraft Life double knit in ice blue to give us literally a sky colour. So again, start with that slip knot on the hook, and this is another nice easy row, just like we did on row 2. We're just going to start with our 2 standard double crochets for the edge stitches, and nice and straightforward back loop double crochets all the way along to the end. So, well, all the way along to the last 2 stitches. So if you want to just do that, your row of back loop double crochets until you get to the last 2 stitches, and make sure in the last 2 you do like we did at the beginning there and just do standard double crochets. Okay, so I've just done row 4 and fastened it off at the end after doing the 2 edge stitches like I said. So now we're going to go back to our sort of our CC1 or XX1 colour, which is basically for the leaves of our hyacinths. So as always, start with that the slip knot on your hook and the standing double crochet. Whoops, get off. And then another double crochet. And this time we're straight in with a front loop treble. There. So now we're going to start our repeat, our pattern repeat. So we start with 1 back loop double crochet, and then so miss this front loop, and then 1 front loop treble. Then we've got 2 back loop double crochets, 1, 2, and now 3 front loop treble. So again, make sure you're working into the correct loop. So 1, 2, 3. Then we've got 2 back loop double crochets. So 1, 2, 1 front loop treble, 1 back loop double crochet, and finally 1 front loop treble. Okay, so that's our first repeat done. Okay, so we are now going to start with back loop double crochet again and a front loop treble, So remember, obviously the front loop trebles are always worked that 2 rows down. Back loop double crochets are worked into the row you'd expect to be working into. So we've now got the 2 back loop double crochets again, and now 3 front loop trebles together. 1, 2, 3, 2 back loop double crochets. Then we've got a, whoops, where are we? A front loop treble, back loop double, front loop treble. So that's our second repeat done. Okay, so you can just carry on repeating that across the row, and you can see actually now how the pattern is starting to take shape. So this is going to be like the stems of our the leaves for our hyacinths, and this is basically like the grass in between. Okay, so I'll see you when you're ready to start the next row. Okay, so that's row 5 complete, and I've also already joined my main colour again for row 6 and done the first 2 edge stitches. So now I'm going to start, before the main repeat, we start with a back loop double crochet, and now we're starting the main repeat with a front loop treble. There we go, 1 back loop double, 2 front loop trebles. So what we're actually doing, you can see, is basically filling in between the trebles that we did on row 5. So we've now got 3 back loop double crochets. If you see a front loop treble on the previous row, you can't do a treble there. You know it's always going to have to be a back loop double crochet. So that's where the 3 are there, then 2 front loop trebles, 1 back loop double crochet, and 1 front loop treble. And then to complete the repeat, we have the last back loop double crochet. So now we're going to do that again together. So we start the next repeat with a front loop treble. Again, always make sure that's the 2 rows down, 1 back loop double crochet, and then 2 front loop trebles. A little tip, if you find you see that pulls up a little bit, they usually will settle down later, but to help you not pull your trebles too tight, it can also be quite helpful if you just stick your thumb on that loop just to tension that while you make the first part of your stitch. Or just get used to trying not to tug that too hard. So 1, 2, 3 back loop double crochets, 2 front loop trebles, 1, 2, then we've got 1 back, 1 front, and finishing up the second repeat with 1 back loop double crochet. So like I said, basically where we had a treble on the previous row, we are working a back loop double crochet, and where we had the back loop double crochets, we're going to be working that front loop treble 2 rows down. And then right until we get to the end, where it's the, as always, the last 2 stitches are just going to be standard double crochets through both loops. So yep, just carry on along there, and I will see you when you're ready to start row 7. Okay, so I have now finished row 6. You can see the pattern starting to take shape. One thing I probably should have mentioned before, if you're struggling to keep a track of where your pattern repeats end, what you can do is just get a little stitch marker. So I've just put them in place, and I've just put them either in the first stitch of a repeat or the last stitch. So this is actually, I've now actually put my little markers in the last stitch of each repeat. So that may help you if you get a little bit lost to just do that. So I've now started row 7 with my 2 edge stitches as usual, and we just need in there a little front loop treble in that first stitch. So now we are starting our repeat. So I'm going to start that with 4 back loop double crochets. So 1, 2, oh dear, what's wrong with me today? 3, 4, the yarn's got all tight, so 4 back loop double crochets there. Now we've got 3 front loop trebles straight on top of these front loop trebles, so 1, 2, 3, and then we'll have another 4 back loop double crochets, 3, 4, and we're now at our last stitch of our repeat because we've got the marker in there, and that's just going to be a front loop treble there. So say if you find that helps you, then by all means just pop that marker back in there. Markers are a great friend to you when you're doing mosaic crochet, especially on the more complicated pattern. So yeah, okay, so we now start again with our 4 back loop double crochets, 2, 3, 4, 3 front loop trebles. Oh dear, 3 front loop trebles, 1, 2, 3, and now 4 back loop double crochets again, 2, 3, 4, 4, and again we now know we're at the last stitch of our repeat, which is going to be front loop treble, tip down. Okay, so we want to carry along just repeating that to the end of the row, and remembering you should end your last sort of proper stitch of the pattern will be like this, the end stitch there, which is the front loop treble 2 down on its own, and then your 2 edge stitches. So I will see you when you're ready to start row 8. So that's row 7 complete now, and as always I've just started with my 2 edge stitches in. I'll switch back to the main colour, start with them. So now for row 8 we're going to need 1 back loop double crochet before we start to go, as you know, because every time you see a treble it's got to be a back loop double crochet. We've now got 3 trebles 2 down, front loops, trebles 2 down, 1, 2, 3. So we're not working into this last one because we're now going to do 5 back loop double crochets, 2, 3, 4, 5. So this is just allowing for the start of our leaves for our hyacinths. Okay, so we've now got 3 front loop trebles again, and we finish our first repeat with that back loop double crochet. Okay, so we'll do that again together. So we're starting with our 3 front loop trebles, 2, 3, then we've got 5 back loop double crochets, 3, 4, 5, 3 front loop trebles, and we're going to end that repeat with a back loop double crochet. Okay, so as always just carry on repeating that across the row, and I'll see you when you're about to start row 9. So that is now row 8 complete. So, and as always I've just started with the 2 edge stitches there. So we start with the front loop treble 2 down, and now we're ready to start on our first repeat. So we're going to start with the 3 back loop double crochets over the top of these trebles, and now we've got 5 front loop trebles, so we are working into all of these front loops in this little section here. 3, 4, 5, and then a little back loop double crochet over the top of all these trebles for row 8. And finally we end that first repeat with the front loop treble. So there's another nice easy one where we're just basically working back loop double crochets over all the trebles, and then when we get to where we had the back loop double crochets on row 8, we're going to be doing our front loop trebles 2 rows down to fill that in. So 3 back loop double crochets, 3, 5 front loop trebles, 1, oh dear, can't crochet today, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, then we've got 3 back loop double crochets, 2, 3, and we end up with 1 treble there. Okay, so as always, just carry on along repeating that till you get to the end, and remembering to do your 2 normal double crochets for your final edge stitches, and I will see you again to do the next row. So this is row 9 completed. One thing I probably should have mentioned before, if you're actually following the chart, the colours shown on it will make it look like you need to use a different colour in a row, but as I said before, we're only using one. So those colours are there just to basically give you an idea of how the design looks. All you need to worry about on the colours front is what is the colour that is shown for the edge stitches on the each end of each row. So for row 10, which we're about to start, you'll see that is the main colour shown there. And all you then need to worry about when you're doing that row is where you see an F. So some people may put an X in, a lot of designers will put an X there. Some will use a D for a drop down treble, but basically wherever you see that capital F, that's telling you that's where you need to do a front loop treble 2 rows down. So that's all you need to worry about. Forget the colours if they're confusing you. Just look for the Fs. When you see an F, do that front loop treble 2 rows down. Any stitch on one of my charts without any kind of symbol in it at all, when you're doing the overlay mosaic, that means it's a back loop double crochet. So say if you follow your eye across a line, like when we did the first row of the main colour down here, you'll see there were no actual symbols on that row at all, so you knew that the whole row was going to be a back loop double crochet. So say that's just to help you with reading the charts. Okay, so I'm now going to start row 10, and as usual I've already done my edge stitches. So we now start the back loop double crochet and starting the first repeat with 2 front loop trebles. Okay, so on the chart you'll see there's 2 Fs there. So now we've got to do 7 back loop double crochets. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and then 2 front loop trebles, 1, 2, and finally in that first repeat a back loop double crochet. Okay, so I'll see you when you're ready to start row 11. So now we are at we've done row 10 and I'm about to do 11, so as usual I've already done the edge stitches, and now what we're going to do, we're going to start with a back loop double crochet there before the main repeat starts. So now we start the main repeat, we've still got another 2 back loop double crochets to go, and then we've got 2 front loop trebles, whoops, 2, then got back loop double crochet. So we've now split it, so we've got the start of a leaf, 1 front loop treble for the stem of the flower, 1 back loop double crochet in between, and then another leaf there like so. Okay, so we now end that repeat with 3 back loop double crochets, 2, 3, ready to start the next one with 2 back loop double crochets again. So again, just carry on to the end of that row, remembering to do your standard double crochets at the end. And then also if you want to do row 12 too, and I will see you when you're about to start row 13. Here I am at the start of row 13, so after 12 rows your work should be looking like that. Okay, so we're back to CC1 or XX1 again, and as always I've done the 2 edge stitches. So we're starting just before the main repeat starts with a back loop double crochet. Now we need 2 more of those, because as I've said before, when you see work trebles on the previous row, the only stitch you can do is a back loop double crochet. Okay, so we now have 2 front loop trebles, 1 back loop double crochet, 1 front loop treble, 1 back loop double, and 2 front loop trebles, and then we finish our repeat with 3 back loop double crochet. Okay, so as always repeat that across. When you finish doing that however many times you need to get to the end, you shall have the 2 stitches left, which will be the ordinary double crochets for the edge stitches. So yeah, if you want to complete row 13 and 14, and I will see you to do row 15 together. Right, so this is what your work should be looking like after row 14. So you can see the shape of the leaves are all really starting to take shape now. So as always, I've got my edge stitches in my CC1, and we're now going to start with 1 back loop double crochet before the repeat proper starts, and then we have another back loop double crochet for the first stitch of the repeat. We're now going to work 2 front loop trebles, 2, oops, then 2 back loop double crochets, 1 front loop treble for the stem of the flower, 2 back loop double crochets, and then we've got 2 front loop trebles for the other leaf. Whoops. And then we end the repeat with 2 back loop double crochets. So there we go. So all ready to start the next repeat with that back loop double crochet. So yeah, just carry on and complete that row, and you should be okay now to complete the next 3 rows after that, I think. So if you get up to complete row 18, we'll be ready to start row 19 when we're going to actually be starting on the flowers. So here we are at the end of row 18. So we've now finished with our sort of leaves and stem of the hyacinth, and we're now going to start on the flowers. So I've got my first 2 edge stitches all done there. We're now going to be switching to, say, the flower colour, which will be shade CC5 or XX3 if you're doing the city palette. Okay, so we start with that initial back loop double crochet, which is before the main repeat starts, and now the main repeat will start with 4 more. So 1, 2, 3, 4. We've now got 3 front loop trebles over here. 1, 2, 3, and we end the repeat with 5 back loop double crochets. 2, 3, 4, 5. So there we go. So obviously we're now going to start again with our 4 back loop double crochets. So it's a nice easy row really. You're just going to be basically working your front loop trebles where you've got these spare loops here, and in between you're going to have runs of 9 back loop double crochets, and of course ending with our 2 normal standard double crochets at the end. So yeah, carry on along there, do the next couple of rows, and I will see you when we're ready to start row 23, I think. Okay, I just completed row 22 and started off row 23 with my 2 edge stitches and this first little back loop double crochet that comes before we start the main repeat. So now we need one more double back loop double crochet and then front loop treble, and now we've got one back loop double crochet, 2 front loop trebles, and we're just going to repeat those. So another back loop double crochet and 2 front loop trebles, and then we're going to finish this row of the flower head with a back loop double crochet and 1 front loop treble, and then that first repeat is going to end with our 2 back loop double crochets. So you can see how that flower is starting to take shape, and hopefully you can see how by just leaving out these occasional little spots there, it helps to give you a texture sort of similar, well, the effect of the little flowers that would be on a hyacinth. At least that's what I hope it looks like. Okay, so if you just now complete that row, as usual, just repeating that across, and do row 24, and I will see you before you start row 25. Just done row 24, and the next 4 rows are actually exactly the same as the last 4 rows. So what we're now going to do is go back to row 21 and do rows 21 to 24 again. So I'll just start that first bit of the repeat again. So here we have, as usual, 2 edge stitches and that first back loop double crochet before the main repeat starts. So we've now got another 2 back loop double crochets, and then we've got 1 front loop treble, 1 back loop double crochet, 3 front loop trebles, 1, 2, 2, 3 back loop double crochet, front loop treble, and we've now got to end the repeat with our 3 back loop double crochets. So there we go. So as always, continue that repeat across, do the next 3 rows after that too, and I will see you when we are about to start row 29. This is what your pattern should be looking like after you've done row 28. So you can see the flowers are really taking shape now. So we're just now going to basically do the last little bit of the flowers here. So we now start, I've already started with the edge stitches and the back loop double crochet before the main repeat. So we've now got to do another 2 back loop double crochets, 1 front loop treble, 1 back loop double crochet, 3 front loop trebles, back loop double crochet, and a front loop treble, and then we end that repeat. Oh, I'm getting all caught up. We end that repeat with, you can see that's pulled up, but what that should do when I now do the next few stitches is just settle down a bit. So we've got 1, 2, 3 back loop double crochets to finish that repeat. Yeah, just tidy them up so that looks fine. So again, repeat that across, and if you do rows 30, 31 and 32 too, we will have then completed the flower heads, and we can then start on the little decorative pattern above it. Completed hyacinths. I've actually also done row 33 because that was basically just a nice simple one where, apart from the 2 edge stitches at each end, it was just back loop double crochets all the way along. So rather than doing that with you, I'm ready to start row 34, and this is a nice simple one too. Actually, I've just started as always with my edge stitches and the first back loop double crochet before you start the main repeat, and all the repeat is on this one is 3 front loop trebles. So 1, 2, 3, followed by a back loop double crochet. So just want to repeat that all the way across. 3 front loop trebles, and 1 back loop double crochet. So this little decorative pattern at the end of part 1 is quite nice and simple. It's just got this 4 stitch repeat. So carry on and do this row and do the next few rows, and I will see you when we're ready to start row 38. Okay, so row 38 was actually another nice straightforward one where it was just basically back loop double crochets all the way along, apart from obviously the edge stitches. So I've just done that. We've also now finished with our main colour for part 1, and we're just now going to be working with the last 2 colours just for the last few rows. So I've started row 39 with the edge stitches and this first little back loop double crochet before the repeat, and again it's nice and simple. It's actually exactly the same as row 37. So we're just going to be doing, start this repeat with the treble 3 down, and then a back loop double crochet, and just basically repeat that all the way along. So you want to carry on, and you should be able now to complete part 1, and we'll just see you right at the end to show you what the finished part 1 will look like. Okay, so I've now done row 42, which is the final row of part 1, and the final row of this first little instalment of overlay mosaic crochet. So I hope you've enjoyed doing that. We will be coming back to this technique in part 3, but next time we're going to be doing the other major mosaic crochet technique, which I call inset, so inset mosaic. So I look forward to seeing you then.